The fluorescent lights hummed overhead like dying insects as I pressed my palm against the cool glass of the ICU door one last time. Through the window, Marcus lay motionless, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision thanks to the ventilator that had become his lifeline these past 3 weeks. The doctors had been clear. There was nothing more they could do. The massive stroke had stolen everything that made him the man I'd loved for 22 years. "I love you," I whispered to the glass, my breath fogging the surface. "I'll always love you." My fingers trembled as I clutched my purse and turned away from room 314. The decision to sign the DNR papers had been the hardest thing I'd ever done. But Marcus wouldn't want to live like this. We'd talked about it years ago, after his father had lingered for months in a similar state. "Promise me, Sarah," he'd said then, holding my hands in our kitchen. "Promise me you won't let them keep me trapped in my own body." I'd kept that promise today. The hallway stretched endlessly before me, polished linoleum reflecting the harsh overhead lighting. My heels clicked against the floor with each step, counting down the final moments of my life as Marcus Chen's wife. Tomorrow they would turn off the machines. Tonight I would go home to our empty house and try to figure out how to exist in a world without him. As I approached the nurse's station, intending to collect Marcus's personal belongings from the storage locker, I heard voices drifting from the break room. The door stood slightly ajar, and something in the tone made me pause. "Can't believe how easy it was," a woman was saying. I recognized the voice. Nurse Jennifer, the blonde who'd been so attentive to Marcus during his stay. 3 weeks of insulin injections, and nobody suspected a thing. My blood turned to ice water in my veins. "You're sure he can't recover?" Another voice, male this time. "Dr. Patel, the neurologist." "Positive. The induced diabetic comas did exactly what we needed. Massive brain damage that looks identical to stroke damage. Even if someone ordered a full toxicology screen now, the insulin would be long gone from his system. Natural metabolization." My knees nearly buckled. I pressed myself against the wall beside the door, my heart hammering so loudly I was certain they would hear it. "And his wife signed the DNR papers today?" Dr. Patel again. "Like clockwork. Poor Sarah, so devoted. She really thinks she's doing the merciful thing." Jennifer's laugh was cold, clinical. "She has no idea her beloved husband was about to expose our little operation." What exactly did he find? Everything. The medication diversions, the insurance fraud, the fake patient records we've been running for the pharmaceutical trials. Marcus was getting too close, asking too many questions in the accounting department. When he started copying files from the financial database, we knew we had to act. "And you're certain his investigation dies with him?" All his research was on his personal laptop, which conveniently disappeared during his medical emergency. Amazing how things get misplaced during a crisis. Without Marcus and without his evidence, there's nothing connecting us to the stolen medications or the fraudulent trial data. I bit down hard on my knuckle to keep from screaming. Marcus hadn't been working late because he was dedicated to his job as the hospital's financial controller. He'd been working late because he'd discovered something horrible, something worth killing for. "How much are we talking about?" Dr. Patel's voice was barely above a whisper. "Conservative estimate? 3.7 million over the past 18 months. The beauty of it is the medications never officially existed in our system. We've been reporting them as damaged or expired, then selling them to black market distributors. The pharmaceutical companies pay us for trial participants who don't actually exist, and we pocket the difference. And the patients? Getting saline instead of their actual medications in most cases. A few adverse reactions, some unexpected deaths, but nothing that couldn't be attributed to their underlying conditions. It's a perfect system. I felt bile rise in my throat. How many patients had died because of their greed? How many families had lost loved ones to this monstrous scheme? Marcus was going to the FBI next week, Jennifer continued. He'd already made contact with an agent. Can you imagine if this had come to light? We'd all be looking at federal prison. But now Marcus Chen dies a tragic death, and his widow inherits his life insurance policy. $500,000 almost makes me feel bad for her. Another cold laugh. Almost. I backed away from the door on shaking legs, my entire world restructuring itself around this terrible new reality. Marcus hadn't had a stroke. He'd been murdered, systematically poisoned by the very people who were supposed to be caring for him. And they were going to get away with it. I made it to my car before the full weight of it hit me. Sitting in the hospital parking garage, surrounded by concrete and shadows, I sobbed until my ribs ached. My husband, my brilliant, ethical, loving husband, had died because he'd tried to do the right thing. He'd discovered their criminal enterprise and paid the ultimate price for his integrity. But he wasn't dead yet. The machines were still breathing for him, his heart still beating. I had until tomorrow morning to decide what to do with this information. I could go to the police, but what proof did I have? A conversation overheard in a break room? Jennifer had been right. By now, any insulin would be metabolized and undetectable. His laptop was gone. Without Marcus's evidence, it would be my word against theirs, and I was just a grieving widow who might have misheard or misunderstood. No. If I wanted justice for Marcus, if I wanted to stop them from killing more innocent people, I needed proof. Real, undeniable evidence of their crimes. I needed to think like Marcus would have thought. I drove home in a daze, my mind churning. Our house felt cavernous and cold, filled with the ghost of our life together. Marcus's coffee mug still sat in the sink from that last morning 3 weeks ago. His reading glasses lay folded on the kitchen table beside a stack of medical journals he'd never finish reading. I poured myself a glass of wine with shaking hands and tried to think. Marcus had been methodical about everything. His work, his hobbies, his research. If he'd been investigating the hospital's fraud, he would have kept records, backups. He was paranoid about losing data after a computer crash years ago had cost him weeks of work. The home office felt like a shrine. His desk remained exactly as he'd left it. Papers neatly stacked, pens arranged in their holder. His desktop computer hummed quietly in the corner, and I realized I hadn't turned it off since the morning of his stroke. I sat in his chair and wiggled the mouse, bringing the screen to life. Password protected, of course. But I knew Marcus. After 22 years of marriage, I knew his patterns, his habits, his sentimentality. Our wedding date. Too obvious. Our first dog's name. Still too simple. Then I remembered the inside joke from our honeymoon in Italy. He'd insisted on ordering gelato at every shop we'd passed, claiming he needed to find the perfect flavor. I'd teased him mercilessly about his gelato quest. I typed Gelato Quest 1995. The desktop loaded. My hands trembled as I navigated through his files. Most were work-related spreadsheets and reports, but buried in a folder labeled Personal Projects. I found something that made my breath catch. A folder titled Hospital Investigation. Inside were hundreds of documents. Screenshots of medication inventories. Pharmacy records showing discrepancies between orders and actual stock. Patient files with suspicious patterns of medication dosages, financial records showing payments to shell companies, and most damning of all, a detailed log of Marcus's findings, complete with dates, times, and the names of everyone involved. Jennifer Walsh, head ICU nurse. Dr. Vikram Patel, neurologist. Dr. Susan Martinez, Chief of Pharmacy, David Kim, Hospital Administrator, and 6 other staff members. Marcus had been thorough, obsessively thorough. He'd documented everything: the systematic theft of high-value medications, the fraudulent pharmaceutical trial data, the suspicious patient deaths, the money laundering through fake consulting companies. He'd built a case that would have destroyed them all. At the bottom of the folder was a file titled FBI Contact Info, with the name and phone number of Special Agent Rebecca Torres. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Here it was, everything I needed to expose them, everything Marcus had died for. But simply turning over his research felt inadequate somehow. They'd murdered my husband and were planning to kill him again tomorrow. They'd caused the deaths of innocent patients for money. They deserved more than just prison time. They deserved to feel the same helplessness, the same betrayal, the same crushing loss that they'd inflicted on others. I spent the rest of the night planning. Marcus had kept detailed records of the medication thefts, including exact quantities and timing. If I could prove they were still stealing medications, catch them in the act, it would strengthen the case beyond any reasonable doubt. But more than that, I could use their own system against them. The next morning, I called the hospital and asked to speak with Jennifer Walsh. "Mrs. Chen, I'm so sorry." Her voice dripped with false sympathy. "I know today must be incredibly difficult for you. Are you ready to make the final arrangements?" "Actually, I've changed my mind," I said, amazed at how calm I sounded. "I want to keep Marcus on life support a little longer. I'm not ready to let go." There was a long pause. "Mrs. Chen, we discussed this. The doctors were very clear about his prognosis. There's no possibility of recovery." "I understand that, but I need more time. Surely the hospital can accommodate a grieving wife for a few more days." Another pause, then her voice took on a harder edge. "Of course, I'll make the necessary arrangements." She was probably panicking. Every day Marcus remained alive increased the risk of discovery. Someone might order additional tests, might notice something suspicious. I was throwing a wrench into their perfect crime. Good. That afternoon, I returned to the hospital carrying a large bouquet of flowers and a basket of homemade cookies for the nursing staff. I made a point of being the devoted, grateful widow, praising everyone for their wonderful care of my husband. "You've all been so amazing," I said, setting the cookies on the counter at the nurses' station. "I don't know how I would have gotten through this without your support." Jennifer smiled tightly as she bit into a chocolate chip cookie. She had no idea I'd mixed a powerful laxative into half the batch, specifically the ones in the pink paper liners that I'd watched her reach for. While she and 2 other nurses were dealing with sudden, violent intestinal distress, I slipped into the medication storage room using the key code I'd observed Jennifer entering earlier. The room was exactly as Marcus had described in his notes: rows of locked cabinets containing thousands of dollars worth of drugs. I quickly photographed everything, paying special attention to the inventory sheets and the vials of insulin. According to Marcus's research, they kept 2 sets of books, one showing medications as expired or damaged, and another showing the real inventory that they sold on the black market. The evidence was overwhelming. Vials that should have been destroyed weeks ago, according to the official logs, were still sitting on the shelves. Medication that was supposedly expired was clearly within its use-by date. The insulin they'd used to murder my husband was right there, waiting to be used on their next victim. I photographed everything, then slipped back out during shift change. Over the next 3 days, I played the perfect grieving widow while systematically documenting their operation. I planted tiny recording devices in the break room and Jennifer's office. I followed David Kim to his meeting with black market medication dealers. recording the entire transaction from across the street. I intercepted emails using the hospital's guest Wi-Fi network and Marcus's knowledge of their system passwords. But my masterpiece was the trap I set for Jennifer herself. I discovered from Marcus's notes that she had a gambling addiction, massive debts to underground poker games and online betting sites. The medication theft had started as a way to pay off her debts, but it had grown into something much larger and more profitable. On Thursday evening, I called her personal number. "Jennifer, it's Sarah Chen. I need to ask you something, and I hope you'll be honest with me." "Of course, Sarah. Anything." "Did my husband suffer? In those final moments before the stroke, was he in pain?" "Oh, honey, no. It was very peaceful. He just slipped away. No pain at all." "That's not true, is it?" Silence. "I know what you did, Jennifer. I know about the insulin. I know about the medication thefts. I know about all of it." "Sarah, I don't know what you're talking about." Marcus kept records, very detailed records. He was going to the FBI next week, remember? More silence. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued, my voice steady and cold. "You're going to meet me tonight at the hospital. Midnight, Marcus's room. Come alone." "Sarah, if you don't come, I'm calling Special Agent Rebecca Torres first thing tomorrow morning. Marcus already made contact with her, you know. She's expecting to hear from him." The line went dead. At 11:45 p.m., I stood in the darkened hallway outside Marcus's ICU room, watching Jennifer approach. She looked haggard, desperate. Her hands shook as she used her keycard to enter the unit. "Sarah?" she called softly. I stepped out of the shadows. "Thank you for coming." "What do you want?" "Justice." I led her into Marcus's room, where my husband lay connected to the machines that had kept him alive for nearly a month. The steady beep of his heart monitor filled the silence. "I want you to look at him," I said. "Really look at him. This is what you did to a good man. An honest man who was trying to protect patients from people like you." Jennifer's composure cracked. "You don't understand. We never meant for anyone to get hurt. The medications we were taking were going to expire anyway. The pharmaceutical trials were just creative accounting. Nobody was supposed to die." "But they did die, didn't they? How many patients received saline instead of their actual medications? How many died because you were too greedy to let them have what they needed? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Marcus was going to destroy everything. Hundreds of people would have lost their jobs. The hospital might have closed. So you decided he had to die. It wasn't personal. It was just business." The casual way she said it, the complete lack of remorse, made something snap inside me. "Business," I repeated. "My husband's murder was just business to you." I reached into my purse and pulled out a syringe filled with insulin. Jennifer's eyes widened. "Sarah, what are you doing?" "Giving you a taste of your own medicine, literally. You can't. You're not a killer. Neither were you until you decided my husband's life was worth less than your profits." Jennifer lunged for the door, but I was ready for her. I'd been planning this moment for days, and adrenaline gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. We struggled briefly before I managed to pin her against the wall. "Please," she gasped. "I have children." "So did some of your victims. So would Marcus and I have had if we hadn't lost our baby years ago to a medication that was probably stolen by someone just like you." Her face went pale. She hadn't known about the miscarriage, about the fertility treatments that had failed, about the dreams of family that had died along with our unborn child. "Sarah, please, we can work something out. I can give you money. You can confess." I held up my phone, which had been recording our entire conversation. "I want you to tell me exactly what you did to Marcus, how you poisoned him, how you planned his murder, how many other patients you've killed, everything. And if I don't, then you get to experience exactly what my husband went through. Repeated insulin injections until your brain shuts down. The only difference is you'll be conscious for all of it. Jennifer broke down completely. Through tears and choking sobs, she confessed everything. The full scope of the medication theft ring, the names of everyone involved, the patients who had died because of their greed, the systematic poisoning of my husband. When she finished, I stepped back and lowered the syringe. "Thank you," I said quietly. You're not going to kill me? Number that would make me just like you, but I am going to make sure you pay for what you've done." I walked to Marcus's bedside and took his hand in mine. His skin was warm, soft, still alive despite everything they'd done to him. "I kept my promise," I whispered. "I found the truth, and now they're going to pay." Then I turned to Jennifer, who was slumped against the wall, still crying. "The FBI will be here in 20 minutes. I called them before you arrived. Agent Torres is very interested in hearing Marcus's evidence and your confession." Jennifer's head snapped up. "You recorded all of this?" "Everything. Your confession will put your accomplices away for life. The families of your victims will finally have justice." As if on cue, we heard footsteps in the hallway, multiple sets, moving with purpose. "FBI, nobody move!" Agent Rebecca Torres entered the room with 4 other agents, weapons drawn but lowered when they saw the situation was under control. "Mrs. Chen, I'm Agent Torres. We spoke on the phone." "Thank you for coming so quickly. I believe you'll find Miss Walsh very cooperative." As they led Jennifer away in handcuffs, she looked back at me one final time. "How did you know I would come tonight?" "How did you know I wouldn't just run?" I smiled sadly. "Because you're just like Marcus thought you were. Arrogant. You couldn't resist the chance to manipulate one more grieving widow. You thought you could convince me to keep quiet, maybe even pay me off." She closed her eyes in defeat as they escorted her from the room. Over the next 3 days, the entire conspiracy unraveled. Jennifer's confession led to the arrest of 8 hospital employees, including Dr. Patel and the hospital administrator. The FBI seized millions of dollars in stolen medications and fraudulent payments. An investigation revealed that at least 47 patients had died as a result of receiving diluted or substitute medications. The hospital faced federal charges, massive lawsuits, and the complete restructuring of their pharmacy and administrative systems. Marcus's evidence had been thorough enough that the case was airtight. Even if Jennifer had recanted her confession, the documentation would have been sufficient to convict them all. On the 4th day after Jennifer's arrest, I sat beside Marcus's bed, holding his hand as the doctor prepared to turn off the ventilator. This time, it truly was a mercy. The man I loved was gone, had been gone since the first injection of insulin had damaged his brain. What remained was just the shell, kept alive by machines. "You did it, my love," I whispered. "You protected all those patients. You saved so many lives." As the machines fell silent and Marcus's heart stopped beating, I felt a strange sense of peace. His death hadn't been meaningless. His work had exposed a criminal enterprise that would have continued killing innocent people. The hospital settled the wrongful death lawsuit for $12 million, which I donated entirely to a foundation for investigating medical fraud. Jennifer Walsh was sentenced to life in prison without parole. The other conspirators received sentences ranging from 25 years to life. Marcus's story was featured on national news programs and led to federal legislation requiring stricter oversight of hospital medication management. 6 months later, I stood at his graveside holding a letter from the family of Maria Santos, a diabetes patient who had died after receiving saline instead of insulin. They thanked me for exposing the truth about their mother's death and finding justice for all the victims. They're all safe now, I said to Marcus's headstone. You saved them all. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of the flowers I'd planted around his grave. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear children playing, the sound of life continuing, of futures that were now possible because my husband had been brave enough to stand up against evil and because I had been strong enough to finish what he started. Marcus always said that love meant protecting the people who couldn't protect themselves. In the end, that's exactly what we had done together. One last case, solved through love and justice and the unbreakable bond between two people who had promised to stand by each other, even beyond death. I kissed my fingertips and pressed them to his name carved in the granite. Until we meet again, my love. Until we meet again.